Hello my dear students, once again you're welcome to JSL Tutorials. This is a platform where social studies is always made simple for you. I welcome you to another session of our series that we've been running with regards to the topic Ghana, my country. In our last lesson, we looked at the climate and the seasons in Ghana. So we are going to continue today to now look at the elements of weather and then the instruments that are used to determine these elements, or the instruments that are used to measure these elements. I want you to get your jotters and your pens ready. We'll get into this lesson, but before that, what do we have to achieve, or what should we achieve by the end of this particular lesson? So let's see our objectives for today. Alright, so by the end of this lesson, or the lesson, the student or you should be able to list at least 5 elements of weather and also identify the appropriate instruments used to measure or determine them. Then you should also be able to tell how these instruments are used, okay, to determine or measure that particular element of weather that you know. So, alright, so now that we know our objectives for today, I believe you remember we defined weather and then climate in the last lesson. So I told you it takes a long time to determine the climate of a place, okay? So a period of about 30 to 35 years we can be able to determine. So they do continuous studies, and the day-to-day weather condition or atmospheric condition is what we refer to as weather. So weather is the day-to-day one. So they give us a weather condition for today. Mostly we find that in our news, okay, when we watch news on telly, and then we are being told that this is the condition. So when they gather those informations cumulatively, then within a period of 30 to 35 years they can now tell the climate of that particular area. So we now know the difference between weather and climate. There are a whole lot of things that make up the weather and the climate, okay, and we call them elements of weather. So we take them one by one, moving away from our objectives, and see what we have now. So rainfall is a factor. Rainfall is a factor. So to determine the amount of rainfall, we need an instrument to do that. So we get to the first instrument. The first instrument we have here, the rain gauge. The rain gauge. Okay. So when you look at the picture clearly, just a wood here that has been dipped in the soil, so firmly, and there is this container attached to it. The container actually has the labelings or the measurements, okay. So as it is there, it is going to accumulate, okay, or gather an amount of rainfall, and this rainfall, depending on the level or the amount, will rise and then hit any part of these measurements or divisions, okay, and they will record it as a number, and that will become the amount of rainfall, okay. So it is easily built. You can get different forms of this, but the main thing is that it should have the measurement to be able to determine the amount of rainfall, okay. So that is what we do. So it's one of the instruments that we use, or the main instrument used to measure the amount of rainfall. So that is the rain gauge. So measures the amount of rain that has fallen over a specific period of time or a specific time period. Rain gauges indicate the amount of precipitation that is released by the atmosphere, okay. So that is it. So mostly rain. All right. So with precipitation, I'm sure you heard that in your science lesson. So you know. So any form of rain, so we can have snow, we can have, that is a solid form of precipitation, and the liquid form of precipitation is the rain. Okay. Now we look at wind. Wind is also a factor. Wind is also a factor. So when you step out there, you realize that there is either fresh wind that will blow around you, or you have, which is the cold wind, or you have the warm wind blowing around you. Now, to know the speed of that wind, the speed of the wind that is blowing, because at times you realize that when you get out, the wind is not that strong, but at times you can experience strong winds blowing. They can determine the speed of that wind with the instrument known as anemometer. So this is the anemometer. So it's just like a normal rod or something built, and they put two caps, or they put caps around it. It could be 3, it could be more than this, just to determine the speed. And then the caps have fans, okay, inside them, or the dial, okay, the dial, they look like fans, so they are actually going to turn or spin as the wind is blowing. So this will determine, so the speed at which the dial turns, okay, would now tell how strong the wind is. So this instrument is called the anemometer. It is used to measure the speed of wind, okay, used to measure the speed of wind. So take note of that. Then another side of the wind that can also be measured is its direction. Its direction. So we now know the speed at which the wind is moving. So we have to determine where the wind is actually coming from, okay, or moving towards. So that will take us to another instrument known as the wind vane. So it can also be called the weather vane. Okay, so wind vane, we have this rod as well, deep down in the ground, and then it is elevated above the land. Then we have cardinal points around it, because cardinal points are actually principal points that tell us the direction of a place, or the position of a place, or of an object. All right. So if we have the cardinal points, then 4 main points, the principal point, the north, south, east, and the west on top of this. Then they normally put objects like, so here you have a how do you call it, a rooster or a cock. So we have it on top of it just to tell or point at the right direction. That's all. So sometimes they can even have a dog on top of it, just to, so anytime this one turns, when the wind blows, then we are able to tell that, okay, where the cock is facing, okay, or the rooster is facing, is the east, or even where the tail of it is pointing is the south or west, or that's why they have to put this thing on it. So most of the time you find something being put on the top, but the most important thing is that it must have the cardinal points, and then also must be built firmly on the rod. Okay, so a wind vane, also called a weather vane, so it is one of the oldest weather tools. Okay, so it is a tool for measuring wind direction. So this is where you have to take note. Alright. It spins on a rod and points in the direction from which the wind comes. Okay, so that is the primary function of the wind vane. Alright, so now let's look at cloud. So we've seen that rainfall is an element of weather, and we now know that wind is also an element of weather. And the wind, we have wind direction and then wind speed. Okay, now cloud is very essential, very important. It can determine the amount of rainfall in an area, because the heavier the cloud, the heavier the rain. So we have these light clouds, white ones in the sky. Now, to tell how high they are above us, or the crust of the earth or the surface of the earth, we should be able to get an instrument to do that for us. And this instrument is known as a ceilometer. So as in ceiling, okay, the word ceiling. So you have the ceilometer doing that for us. So the ceilometer actually has a laser or uses other lights or forms of light, okay, reflect it into the, or shoots that light into the atmosphere or into the sky, and then it will now read. They have a place where they will read and determine the height of the clouds, okay. So the ceilometer is used to measure the height of cloud or cloud height. So take note of that. So we have the amount of cloud. That one is a different instrument used for that. And then we have the height of cloud. This one is for the height of clouds. And we will talk about the amount of cloud very soon. Alright. Let's get to a very important element. Atmospheric pressure. The amount of pressure in the atmosphere. The amount of pressure in the atmosphere. So this is something we have to also look at. The barometer. Barometer. There are different kinds, aneroid barometer, and so many ones that have been named after their inventors. But we have the barometer used to measure atmospheric pressure. So it measures air pressure. So it tells us whether or not the pressure is rising or falling. So there's a lot of pressure in the atmosphere. Okay. Then a rising barometer means sunny and dry conditions, while a falling barometer means stormy and wet conditions. So that means that if the pressure, okay, so look at this, a rising barometer means sunny and dry conditions. If the pressure is low, you realize that you have this taking place in the atmosphere. So you have this needle here actually changing. So there is change here, and then there is fair, and then there is very dry, and then there is stormy, and then there is rain. So it's actually telling us about the weather condition. If there is a change, so it will begin from here. If there is a change, it will move. Then if there is a fair weather condition, it will move to this part. The needle will get to this part or point to this side. And then very dry, when the atmosphere is very dry, or the pressure, it will now read and move to this side. Stormy, it will move to this side. And then if it is a rainy or wet weather condition, you find the needle reading up to that number, and they will record it. So that is the major function of the barometer. It is used to measure the pressure of air, okay, in the atmosphere, or in one word or two words, atmospheric pressure. All right, so just take note of that. Now we look at another thing, humidity. So this one is the amount of water content. So the water content in the atmosphere, okay, or the amount of water, moisture in the atmosphere. And we need to determine that, because when there is no moisture in the atmosphere will actually be dry and breathing will become difficult, okay. But we will see when the atmosphere is high, there's something that is going to happen. When the humidity, the water content is very high, it's actually, I explained that in our last video, where we said when there is a high humidity, what is going to happen is that because the atmosphere is already cool, bodies like human bodies that have water in them will not be effective in terms of water leaving our system, okay, or the heat in our system. So the heat stays in our system, and then we begin to feel a lot of heat, okay. So let's see what is happening here. So a hygrometer is a weather instrument used to measure relative humidity. That is hygrometer. There is one with a D, that is hydrometer. That one is used to measure relative density. So you remember the D, density, D, hydrometer. But the hydrogen is used to measure the relative humidity, the amount of water content or moisture in the atmosphere. So how much water vapor is present in the air. Okay, that is it. So they use percentage for you. Realize that in our last video, the climate and the seasons, we're actually looking at a humidity 90%, 75% of some of the climatic zones. Okay, so you can, if you have not watched that video, get it and then learn more over there. Okay, so that is for atmospheric pressure. Now let's look, sorry, that is for relative humidity. So we move to the amount of cloud, okay, the cloud cover in the sky. Something holds the cloud over there. We call that the aerosol. So aerosol, that's the aerosol. That is what holds the cloud. When the clouds become very heavy and then it's too much for the aerosol to hold, then it has to fall back as rain. So to fall onto the earth as rain. So how can we know that in this area we are, or in your environment or locality, there's an amount of cloud? How do you determine that? So you can simply demonstrate that with a mirror. You can mark the mirror into 8 divisions. The 8 divisions, most of the time we use that as a standard measurement, and that 8 divisions is what we call or refer to as octets. So OKTAS, so meaning a division of 8. So when you mark that on your mirror and then you take the mirror outside, it is going to actually reflect or show the cloud. If the cloud covers the boxes, because you have already marked them into 8, it is going to cover. If there is no portion of the mirror, like what this person is demonstrating over here or having over here, if there is no portion of the mirror that has been covered, then it means that the sky is completely clear, okay, of clouds. There is no cloud in the atmosphere. That's a clear sky. If you have it divided this way, then it means that you have 1 octa. 1 octa. That's the unit. So the octa becomes a basic because you have actually divided the surface of the mirror into 8 divisions, okay, or 8 parts. If you have a part like this or a section like this covered, then it means you are going to read 2 octets. So you can see all these things, take note of them. Then when you do the demonstration, you can actually determine the amount of clouds that is covering the surface of the sky from your view. Okay, then you know all the interpretation. So if you have this entirely, the circle, the surface of the mirror entirely covered, it means that the sky is completely cloudy. Okay, covered by cloud. That is how we read or determine the amount of cloud. So the main instrument used for that is a cloud mirror. So the cloud mirror is used to measure the percentage of cloud cover. Okay, a cloud mirror estimates the amount of cloud coverage in the sky. The percentage of cloud cover is visually estimated and expressed in octets. So octets is the units, the basic units. Take note of these things for your objective tests. Then that is the 8 of the sky covered in cloud. So 8 measured in 8 octets, that's the unit. And the instrument is a cloud mirror. Okay, if we get that, then take a deep breath. We still have 3 more to talk about. The next one we look at temperature. You know, you are very familiar with this, with the measurement of temperature, the hotness and the coldness of an object, of a body. This is the instrument. The instrument is the thermometer. So the thermometer is very common. there are different types now. You can have the clinical one, the one you go to the hospital, you put under your armpit or your tongue to just check your body temperature. And then you can even have the one that has become very common these days because of the COVID-19 season. They have to check your temperature. The digital one, which people refer to as a thermometer gun. So they point it, it has an infrared function or element that can actually read the temperature by just gauging it at your forehead. Then you get the temperature. So but this one is just a common student temperature for studies, for learning. So you have the measurement here in Fahrenheit, and then you have the degree Celsius measurement here. So you can see. So you know how it operates as far as your science lessons or studies are concerned. You know how it moves, and then it goes higher and higher. So in degrees Celsius, if you are checking the reason why we have the 2 units here, you can use this and still convert to this, or vice versa. Okay, so talking about the body, the water as a body, for instance, if you are looking at degrees Celsius, science lessons will tell us that it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and boils at a maximum of 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, but when you come to Fahrenheit measurement, that is different. So I think with the Fahrenheit, it boils at 212 or 212 Fahrenheit. Then you have the freezing point as 32 Fahrenheit. So that is for this side. So you can use both units, or you can just stick to one. But all you have to know is that the thermometer is used to measure temperature, okay, the hotness and the coldness of a body, All right, so let's quickly look at weather satellite. So this is actually a general one. A weather satellite looks like a satellite in space, and is actually there to record everything that is related to the weather. So you have it takes photographs of things over there, and then it will now give information to those who are actually monitoring that particular satellite here on Earth. So weather satellites are used to photograph and track large-scale air movements. Okay, then meteorologists compile and analyze the data with the help of computers. So they are on Earth here, monitoring the activity of this weather satellite in space, and then when it takes the pictures and then gather all those information, they are transmitted through our networks, and then we are able to access all those information, and then they will start giving us weather information and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is what the weather satellite does for us. Let's look at sunshine. So the amount of sunshine, that will say, is very, very important. So we are not actually calculating the number of hours in the day. Okay, in the day in particular, even within an hour, what is the amount of sunshine or sunlight, okay, that reflects on the surface of the earth? So that is what we are trying to measure. So the sunshine recorder is used to do that, and looks like this. So very sophisticated, looks like a microscope anyway. So what it has here, the main features are, there's a glass ball, and then there is a card under this glass ball, okay, and then they will have to look into this and then see the number of, now this is how it operates. So when the sun reflects, it's actually going to throw its light or heat on the surface of the glass ball, and the glass ball will now reflect it on the card, and it will show as bands, B-U-R-N-S, as bands on the surface of the card. So they go there and they read it, and they can tell the amount of sunlight by just reading the amount of bands, or the number of bands that has occurred on the surface of the card through the reflection of the glass ball. So they are able to determine that and then tell us the amount of sunshine or sunlight that we enjoy in a day, a particular period of time. So these are some of the elements of weather. We've so far looked at the rain gauge used to measure the amount of rainfall. Then we've looked at the wind speed, where we have the instrument anemometer doing that perfect job for us. Then we have the wind direction, where the wind is moving towards or coming from. We can use this to determine very old instrument. Then we also spoke about the ceilometer. So that is actually telling us the height of clouds away from us, okay, in the sky, the height. Okay, so when it is close, it will determine it. When it is very far away or further away, it can also tell us through its laser and then its sensitive lightning systems. Atmospheric pressure, we have the barometer, so the pressure in the atmosphere as the wind blows, okay, or the air blows around us, the pressure in it. This will measure it for us, and then we can know or get an information about that. So we also look at humidity, the amount of water vapor or moisture or water content in the atmosphere. That's it. So we talked about the hygrometer as an instrument. Then we look at the amount of cloud amounts covering the surface of the sky. Then we saw the cloud mirror used for that. We saw the very popular common thermometer, the thermometer. Then we looked at the weather satellite and the sunshine recorder, So these are few of the elements of the weather, and the very important ones we've seen. And then we've also seen how these elements can be used to determine these instruments can be used to determine the elements for that matter. So here we are, we've been able to achieve our objectives. I'm sure you out there have learned a lot. You can play any part of this video, it's always there for you. Then you can get all your information or your facts updated. Alright, so dear students, we've come to an end of this particular lesson. We've succeeded in looking at the elements of weather and the instruments. Make sure you share this video to with your friends out there, and then continue to post your comments. If there is a question you have, feel free. We are here to study. I'm also here to learn a lot from you. Thanks for subscribing, and also thanks for liking the video.